When I get older, losing my hair, many years from now, will you still?
Good afternoon. My name is John Lutz. I'm the Executive Director of Elder Services of Berkshire County, and this is Berkshire Senior TV. Today, we're going to talk with Michael Morelli from Community Legal Aid, about the services they provide, what role they play in Berkshire County in the legal community, and how people can best access them when they have a concern. So, Michael, I want to appreciate you being here today.
Thank you for having me, John.
And why don't we start with you telling us what Community Legal Aid is?
So Community Legal Aid is a free legal assistance organization here in Berkshire County. People may remember us better as Western Mass Legal Services, and for maybe the last 30 or 40 years. And in 2011, we had merged with another legal services organization, and now we're Community Legal Aid. We offer the same services that we provided as Western Mass Legal Services, but now we're in 5 counties. So, obviously we're in Berkshire, we're in Hampshire, Hampden, Franklin, and Worcester County.
So you're essentially Worcester West.
We're Worcester West.
As one large organization.
Right. Some people would think West stops at Springfield, yes. But as we've known over the years, that's what people say. But yes, Worcester West all the way to Berkshire.
Yes. Okay.
Yep.
So Community Legal Aid, that makes it sound like I can come to you for any legal problem I might have, perhaps if I'm of a lower income or disadvantaged position in the community, but I don't think you cover just anything.
Right. Many would hope that we covered just anything they wanted, and we wish we could. But no, we handle specific areas of civil legal issues only, right? So no criminal, we don't handle any criminal issues. That's the private, CPCS. So some of the things we handle are family law cases, family law issues, which could be a divorce, could be a restraining order, custody, issues of custody when the person who has custody is at risk of losing it. And we also handle housing. So again...
And when you say housing, you're not talking about mortgages, sales, you're talking about...
Right, we're not on that end of it. We do handle where people go into foreclosure, but we also handle evictions and do eviction work. Typically, when someone who has a subsidy is at risk of losing it through the eviction process, they get a notice, what's called a notice to quit, and asks them to leave, and at that point we can jump in and see if we can help. We also handle, I handle the public benefits in the Pittsfield office, so that's a wide range. That's food stamps and cash assistance, which are both through the Department of Transitional Assistance. Cash assistance, better known as welfare. There's also a small state disability program where we also can provide advocacy. And with those DTA programs, we offer assistance and advocacy and possibly representation when someone's benefits are reduced or they're denied an application or they're terminated. They get a notice that they're terminated from the program. I also handle EA family shelter cases, which is governed by the Department of Housing and Community Development. It's where somebody is denied shelter. Basically, they're homeless and their eligibility is actually through the family concept. They have a child under the age of 21 that's living with them. So, and let's see, unemployment insurance, and those basically are cases where there's a separation issue. Someone's either fired or they quit a job, and we look at the case and potentially represent the claimant, not the employer, the claimant. And we also handle, or I handle Medicaid and Medicare issues, Mass Health, Mass Health being the state Medicaid program, and Medicare issues. And as you know yourself, those are vast issues, but some of the things we do handle are denials, obviously, someone who's going to be terminated Mass Health benefits, reduction in services, more of the nitty-gritty patient-paid amounts in a Mass Health case where a spouse is in the nursing home, or even when just a person on their own is in the nursing home, and Medicare issues as well. And those, again, really run the gamut. We tend to help on late enrollment penalty issues with Medicare Part A and Part B. So Part A is hospital insurance, skilled nursing payment through Part A as well, and some home health agency services are paid through Part A. And then Medicare Part B is just your regular health insurance that has a premium. And so late enrollment penalties for both Part A and Part B basically were somebody where Medicare says, hey, you didn't initially enroll when you should have, and now that you're enrolling much later, we're going to penalize you with a monetary amount on top of your base premium. And I think that's it. We also, just as an agency, we handle Social Security disability denials and overpayment issues. And I handle overpayment issues for the elder population. So, and we tend to see a lot of those.
And just to clarify, even though you're on Berkshire Senior TV, you do not serve only elders, you serve anyone.
So we serve elders and non-elders. If you're a non-elder, then there's an income eligibility threshold that you have to meet. But once you meet it, it's a free service if we take the case. It's not sliding scale. We're not saying, you pay us, $60 as opposed to $100. It's free. But if you're an elder, and which for the purposes of our program, many programs in the state is 60 and over.
Right, same with us.
Right. So it's you will not be denied service based on not meeting our income eligibility threshold, which means you can have as much income as you wanted, and we will certainly look at the case, and that will not bar you from our eligibility, and that's basically because federal law requires us to do that.
Let's go through, and you mentioned a lot of things that you guys do. But let's maybe talk a little bit about what are the areas where you probably have the most activity. I know one area that you do a lot with is benefits preservation, for lack of a better phrase. Talk about that a little bit and what someone might come to you with regarding public benefits.
Well, typically I think people come to us. There are a lot of things people could come to us with, but as an example, somebody could come to us with a food stamps reduction, right? Suddenly their food stamps are either wiped out or they're going to be terminated.
And that's their SNAP benefit.
That's right. Yeah. So food stamps are, also known as SNAP, the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program. And so, somebody could get a notice that says, for whatever reason, you're no longer getting them or they're greatly reduced. So if a case like that comes into us, one of the things I'm going to look for is why is DTA saying this, right? But along the way, I think certainly in my role as a public benefits advocate is also trying to issue spot other things that might be happening, which is probably sort of more, that benefits, I guess what we call income maximization. So, a good example of that, I guess, would be an elder comes to us and is not, and I should just back up and say people can get in touch or can challenge their amount of their food stamps just because they think, hey, this doesn't look right to me. I think for whatever reason, or I talked to somebody, but at any rate, we may look at a case, or I may look at a case and say, well, gee, they're not getting that medical expense deduction because nobody ever told them that they could deduct their medical expenses, and they don't even know the broad array of deductions that they're allowed. So part of that would be preserving the benefit, and then maybe looking for a retroactive benefit, and then also I think, which should always be a part of our advocacy, is providing advice and support with DTA, I think, to say, going forward to try to keep the benefits in place, whether that be you're communicating with a worker or, even if it's just giving advice to your client and saying, going forward you should do this, this, and this, because you don't want people to keep getting into the same situations. So, there's an income maximization component, and also throughout that you might see something. I mean, this happens a lot, right? I'm helping somebody on that, and then maybe I realize there's a SSI overpayment. And then you say, well, boy, so why is that happening? And then maybe helping them cure that overpayment so they don't carry that debt anymore.
Scenario, someone walks in, an elder, and says, I need help with my Mass Health application.
So we wouldn't actually provide assistance on their Mass Health application.
Okay.
That's where we would say, go to Elder Services.
And we would send them to a Shine counselor.
Right. And the Shine counselors are great, and it's a great program. So right, I would email Sean a post and I
Right.
would say, hey, I have this client. What's the next move? But if they submitted that mass health application, they got denied, then we would certainly, because now there is a legal issue. And I should say there are certain situations where they need help with an application. Maybe something happened where they were denied or someone wouldn't take it. I mean, it's very rare in certain situations, but so I wouldn't just say get out, or you go get out of here.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
when you have a legal issue, you want to know why the application didn't get submitted, and you want to understand those facts up front because there may be a reason why, and it may actually inform if we in fact help them with the application. But generally speaking, we don't do that type of work. We would refer them to a Shine counselor. But if it comes back as a denied application, then we would look at why they were denied. I mean, look, sometimes, and it's really unfortunate, when somebody hits 65 and they're on mass health, the income eligibility, financial eligibility for that program drops.
Right.
They were at one level, and now just by virtue of turning 65, now they're down here, and they don't understand. They're saying, well, wait a minute, my income didn't change.
They may have been eligible before and now find themselves uneligible
Right.
or ineligible, and without any real, it's just a circumstance of time passing.
Just right, and just because the regulations around income change at the age at which, at 65. I mean, that's just one issue where, elders, I think, and myself included, if I were in that position, are confused as to what happened
Right.
because they have done nothing, right? Their
Right.
income, I mean, many times elder income doesn't really change.
Right.
So
Except very marginally.
very
yeah.
marginally
Yeah.
with cost of living adjustments and other things. But, when a denial comes in, you really are curious why, or a termination. And so we would go from there. I think part of that and part of any of our casework is also looking for services that we can put into place for people, because I'm a paralegal in the office, and I, as a public benefits advocate, there is sort of a social work component to it,
Oh,
I
sure.
think, that
Yeah.
maybe I shouldn't say, I don't want to offend any of our attorneys in our office, but, I think we're...
Or any social
Or
worker.
any social worker, right. Far be it from me to align myself with social work. But I think there's this component where you try to help and you try to do a little more. And so there are times where, at least I try to look at even non-legal ways to remedy a situation. It doesn't always mean that it's going to be me, but maybe a really appropriate referral to an agency and a really good, clean referral where you're really getting them the service they need. I mean, that's usually a part of the process anyway.
Yeah, and I know when our agencies have interacted, I think that's what we often come to you guys about is just not necessarily will you take this case,
Right.
but you must have dealt with this type of thing before.
Right.
Can you help us help this person who might be on our state home care program or might be on any of the programs that we provide? And as you said, then this other thing comes up.
Right.
And that you, like in the midst of assessing or working with them over a period of time, this other issue comes up. And I know a lot of times when we contact community legal aid, it's not necessarily for a referral, but it's like, help us understand, you guys have done this a lot. We don't, you don't need another case because you've got plenty.
Right.
But is it, could you give us that kind of advice so we can get them going in the right direction?
Right, yeah. I mean, actually, our agencies have really good back and forth, and we consult a lot. And I always tell, I've told many staff at Elder Services and other social services agencies, you can call me and we can talk about the issues that your clients are having. I'm always available to talk to people. I'm not always. I always stress, please don't have your client call me directly.
Right, yeah,
They
right.
unfortunately. But yeah, no. I think there's a great back and forth in terms of trying to figure out what can we do with this client, and running certain scenarios by each other to see. And I do the same. I mean, I've done certainly similar things. Clients where they've got Medicare A and B, but they lost mass health and they don't have a supplement plan. And hey, is there any way they can talk? But anyway, what do you think about this?
Right.
And so sort of strategizing. It's a very good reciprocal relationship. Yeah.
Now, one of the other areas, we talked about benefits preservation. I know one of the other areas is tenancy preservation that you guys can get involved with when someone's living in either in public or private housing.
Right. So we have a housing attorney at Community Legal Aid, Paul Shack, and so, like I said, he gets involved in cases where there is the risk of losing subsidy. through an eviction. So they could be in public housing.
Okay, yeah, I think, yeah, just
So,
you might want to
sure.
clarify, what do you mean by, we're talking about housing, but you're talking about subsidy.
Sure,
What does
sure.
that mean?
Right, let me clarify. It's like only you and I are having
Right,
this
yeah, yeah.
conversation. Nobody else is involved. Public housing, state and federal public housing,
Okay.
which is housing where people pay a percentage of their income. They have to meet an income eligibility threshold to be even in those programs. But
Right.
once they do, they pay roughly 30% of their income towards their rent. And they have what's known as a subsidy through state and federal public housing. There's also federal, there's Section 8. There are vouchers, where people go anywhere in the community, basically, and find an apartment. And there's also what they call project-based Section 8s, where the unit is the
Right.
Section 8 unit, and they live there. But those are all, that's what I mean when I say subsidy. And so, when somebody gets evicted, they potentially lose their subsidy. And so part of, I think, what Paul's work is preserving that tenancy and preserving that subsidy through, eviction defense work. And I can't speak to everything Paul does. Paul does a lot. And part of that, I think, is really looking at key issues throughout the eviction process and also working, I think, pretty closely with the housing agency at hand to see what they can do in order to keep this person housed.
Yeah, and I know, just in the cases we've been involved with over the years, the eviction process in Massachusetts is a long, it's a long process, and I think that's usually where, and when I've been involved and when we've sought consultation, it's been, well, let's start with, was the process followed, kind of, were everything done and all the ducks in a row kind of thing, and that's often where we would start.
Right, well, I think probably that's where we start too. Under the law, did the landlord do everything they were supposed to do in terms of written notification for this eviction to be legal, I guess. And, oftentimes, a notice to quit might be faulty, might be defective, and then I think Paul would ask for a motion to submit a motion to dismiss because the eviction notice wasn't proper. But I don't want to speak too much to Paul's work because I don't handle it. I think a lot of what goes into that is certainly communicating with the housing agency or with the landlord. In terms of finding some suitable agreement, but also when things are not right, taking action where we think we should to preserve someone's tenancy.
Now, you mentioned unemployment benefits.
Right. So unemployment insurance benefits where, is the insurance program. It's actually a federal program that the states opt into that provides insurance benefits when somebody either is discharged or they quit their job. So, there's the big fallacy out there, of course, is if you quit your job, you're not eligible for unemployment insurance, which is actually not true. You can be eligible. But
Can be.
You can be. You may be. That really, a lot of these cases really depend on the facts, and they're very fact-driven cases. But basically, in a discharge case, the employer bears the burden in proving why John should not get unemployment insurance.
Right.
And when a claimant or former employee quits, they have the burden to show what good cause existed for them to quit that job. And those we represent basically at unemployment appeal hearings.
So you actually go to the hearings?
I can go to the hearings. I'm a paralegal, but a lot of the work I do is administrative law, and you're not required to, or I'm not required to be licensed. Certainly, all of these, whether it be DTA or unemployment, which is under the Department of Unemployment Assistance, they can go into court if you've exhausted your appeal rights under those agencies. And I wouldn't be able to represent, but our agency, if we felt strongly about the case, and we would go forward with it. It wouldn't be me. But I want to, before I forget too, one of the things I wanted to mention, one of the other issues that we handle are also nursing home discharge cases. So someone in a skilled nursing facility who, for whether it be income or behavior or whatever, they get a discharge notice where the nursing home says you are discharged, and good luck.
Yeah, and I know that this is an area that we have worked together on various cases with,
Right.
and also has sometimes involved elder protective services even.
Right, right. Yeah, and on my end, I think, again, those are the kind of cases they come through, and you really are looking at how do you preserve this elder's tenancy in a way, right? And is there a way to either keep them where they are, and is the discharge appropriate? Did the nursing home do the things they needed to do in order to properly discharge? Is there a plan in place? And so,
because as I understand it, and for folks who are watching, it's the facility's responsibility to ensure that there's a safe discharge.
that's right, right.
Not just appropriate, but safe.
A safe and the wording I think is safe and appropriate discharge.
Yeah.
That's right, and that's right. They're required to do that under the state regulations. So, right, and you know they, for whatever reason, may not always do that. And they're also required that when they're going to discharge a nursing home resident, they have to provide the legal services organization in their area so that the person knows that they can reach out to us.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yes.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, they're required to provide that information. And that's typically how we find out because it looks, well, I don't know how much it happens, but at least in the instances where we get a nursing home case, you know, when we review the file, we can see that they were notified in writing of our legal services organization.
Because we often learn, you know, we have the ombudsman program that we talked about earlier,
Right.
that's both paid and volunteer driven, and that's often sometimes where we will get involved. As an ombudsman will say, and then they'll make a referral, and then we sometimes will get involved. And as I mentioned, sometimes even Berkshire Elder Protective Services gets involved, depending on what the circumstances are as far as the planned discharge.
Right, right. I mean, the most important thing in those situations, which you already know, is that if first of all, if a nursing home resident gets that notice, they should contact legal services immediately. But also, if they contact elder services or elder protective services, that will get referred to us hopefully as well.
Right.
You know, that's sort of that wraparound service that I think is really important.
So the idea there is that you're being discharged. It's our responsibility as a facility to make sure you can avail yourself of whatever advocacy you feel is appropriate.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure if they're required to provide every form of advocacy.
But they need to let them know that if you as the resident feel like you need one, here's the local office.
Well, if they're issuing a discharge notice, whether the person feels like they need legal services or not, they need to provide an appeal, a form that notifies them that they can appeal the decision, and that with that information about our agency.
And in those cases,
and how to contact our agency. I didn't mean to cut you off.
I mean, can someone be discharged for purely financial reasons?
Yes, they can, right? I mean, in those cases, right, I mean, I'm trying to think of like a good case. I mean, where, say, Mass Health doesn't approve them for long-term care, right? They're there for 6 months or 3 months, but then the ASAP comes in.
We do our assessment.
You do your assessment, and you determine, say, that they're just not clinically eligible for nursing home services under the Mass Health program. And of course, the nursing home says, "Uh-oh, we're not getting paid anymore."
Right.
And so, yeah, they can. They certainly can discharge somebody purely for financial reasons.
But still have the obligation of being safe and appropriate.
Yes, always.
So it's yeah.
Right, right. So, and that's certainly what we look at, or at least that's what I look at when I'm looking at the case. What did they do when they discharged them? What was the protocol? Did they put a plan in place? Did they account for their disabilities? Did they, discharging someone to a shelter in Springfield who is in a wheelchair, that's an extreme case, is not a safe and appropriate discharge. I mean, anytime you discharge somebody to an individual shelter, any shelter, there's a requirement that they have to be out looking for work and be out of the shelter in order
during the day,
in order to regain their self-sufficiency. And if you have any sort of disability, that's going to be really difficult to do.
Right. Now, you mentioned earlier the Pittsfield office. Where are the offices for Berkshire County Community Legal Aid?
So the Pittsfield Community Legal Aid office is at 152 North Street. In the Shipton building. That's the old name of the building. And we're at Suite E155. And people can, I should say, can call our number, 413-499-1950, to apply by phone. We do have income eligibility. We do have restrictive intake hours.
Right.
Typically 9:30 to 12:15 most days, or every day except Wednesday, which is 1:30 to 4:15. But I would advise if people have internet access, they can go online to www.communitylegal.org and fill out an application online. There is no restrictive timeline. They can apply anytime online, and they should hear back from somebody, I think, between 24 and 48 hours.
And is that a centralized, or is that actually somebody in your office, or would that be through Community Legal Aid as an organization?
Right. So as an organization, that goes in, somebody reviews it.
Oh, I didn't know that you guys were doing that.
Right. So we have a all county intake system, and so whoever, if somebody calls and they talk to a screener, an intake screener in Worcester, they will still, of course, talk to them about their eligibility for a case that will be in Pittsfield.
And is Pittsfield your only office?
So no, we do have an outreach office in North Adams at 61 Main Street. It's actually within the Northern Berkshire Community Coalition offices.
Oh, right, sure.
So we don't staff it regularly, but we certainly do it by appointment, and I suppose people could stop by if they wanted to get a card or a brochure.
Yeah, we have an office in 85 Main there, in that large building where there's a lot of human service agencies have space.
Years ago, I think we were at 85 Main as well. Yeah, many years ago.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, I want to thank you for being on again. This is Legal Aid Month, I believe, and it's Older Americans Month.
That's right.
So we wanted to hit both of those, but appreciate you, and hopefully people will find this helpful in seeking assistance when they need it.
I hope so too. Thank you so much for having me, John.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Will you still need me? Will you still feed me when I'm 64? Dum 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 doo dum 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 doo dum dum. You'll be older too. And if you say